Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of It's Just Feminism, where we try to answer some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, who are feminists, what do feminists do, and can feminism actually change the world? Well, the guests of this series will show by example that not only does feminism have potential to change the world, they're actively doing it. My name is Aurora, I'll be your host, and join me today is Harman to talk about her upcoming book, Yellowbark Spider. Before we get into it though, I just want to quickly remind you that this is a safe space, so any type of violence or hate will not be tolerated, but you're more than welcome to share your own thoughts, opinions, and experiences in the comments down below. Also, I just want to let you know that this episode is not sponsored or endorsed by, the press or anything else, but it is made in the collaboration with River Street Writing. They sent me a free copy to review of this book in preparation for the interview. For transparency reasons, I believe that this is something that you should know. To find out more about the book and how you can get your copy and how you can become a reviewer for River Street Writing as well, you will find the links in the description down below. Now let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here today with me to talk about your new upcoming book, which is amazing. Like, I read it practically in one breath from the perspective of, the topics and the approach, and also like format play. I love when authors decide to step back from just like words on the paper and that's it, and you actually play with it. You play with uppercase, lowercase, and with the letters falling down and the repeat, and then to begin with, can you please introduce yourself a little bit? So where are you from, what do you do, what do you stand for, and things like that?
My name is Harman Burns. I am a writer and sound artist and video maker, currently residing in Vancouver. I was born in Saskatchewan on Treaty 6 territory, and I currently reside on the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people here. I'm a trans woman, and I stand for self-determination, self-expression, disability justice, climate justice. All of these things are daily a part of my life and conversations between me and my partner, and kind of informs everything we do. And I think as a writer, I try to just explore conflict. I think maybe most writers do, but just between the inner and outer world, and also the inner world too, which is maybe where the most passionate conflicts always occur. So I think that's something.
Yeah, that's amazing, and it shows in the book. I love how you define the kid through experiences and through feelings, besides like focusing on physical appearances and like artificial stuff like that, which then allows us to take a deep dive into the character and relate to them and feel with them, and it makes them feel much more real. And I love that books have that power to do that for us. When did you first discover your passion for writing, for artistic creative expression in general, and what does your writing mean to you? What do you want it to mean to other people around you?
I started writing when I was very young. My dad is a writer, so it was always modeled to me that that was something that was possible to be, sort of in a in a professional sense, but also just like you look at books on a shelf when you're a kid, and they're just, how did these objects come to be? They're just here and they're wonderful and I love them, but to see someone who wrote them, and I could see a binder on his desk with a draft, I could see how it worked, and so it seemed to me that this was something that I should try. So I always liked storytelling. I like the medium a lot. It's something maybe a bit corny, but the way I always kind of picture it is like an idea for a book is kind of like a piece of fabric that's kind of flowing in a sort of multi-dimensional space in your mind, and it's sort of infinite. But when we use language, we sort of pin it down or tack it into a surface and sort of pin it in 3 dimensions, and then we can show it to someone, and they can then look at those pinnings and reassemble that kind of inexpressible thing in their mind, which I think is pretty amazing. And that's very unique to writing. It exists completely in the mind, and I think there's no other medium like it, and that's why I'm drawn to it. In terms of what I want it to mean to other people, I think the best I can hope for as a writer is to just create some kind of spark or something in someone's mind where it can just kind of smolder in there and maybe give them present them new concept or a new way of seeing something, and bring that kind of shared emotional experience that can enrich their life in some way. And I don't feel that my job is to convince the reader of anything. I think it's just to try to present them with something to help them dream. And if I can make a reader dream, then I think I did my job.
That's beautiful. I have never heard somebody like compare in that sense, like stitching or doing with fabric and then dealing with words, but it fits perfectly. And yeah, I totally agree. Like, it's not your job to pursue somebody or to make them change their mind like violently or force them into it, because that doesn't work. Most people won't do that if they don't want to do that. So sometimes it's good to revisit some books and stuff like that to see if we grew up in the meantime, if something can mean more to us. And I mean, this book, Yellow Bark's Spider, it has a lot of those sentences that stay with you. They're like masterfully made, and I literally wrote some of them down for myself because they made me stop, like, and take a deep breath and like, okay, and then I can move on. And one of those sentences was in the beginning of the book around age 30-ish. When you write, a kid learns that sometimes it's easier to play dead. Sometimes if you play dead long enough, you might find that you are afraid of games forever. I mean, my voice is trembling because it's so beautiful and it relates to so many situations that all of us have had. And it can mean different things for different people, but I think that unfortunately a lot of us had that moment, that dissociation and that fear, that anxiety that then follows us through life. And sometimes we have to just confront it and deal with it and grow with it and do something else with it. And I think that this gives that like push, like, yeah, you can do it. Like, it's not the end of the world. You will survive, you will grow. Like, it does not have to define you as such.
Thank you. I feel like you really understood the book, and it means a lot to me to hear you say that stuff. That's very sweet. So, thank you.
Besides the written word, you also use movies, like you're a film director as well. You also do some stuff with sound, with songs, voices, and stuff like that. So how do you choose which medium you will use for which topics, or which story you will tell in which type?
In terms of which medium to pick, that's always a tough one, because sometimes, I think this probably happens with a lot of folks, but sometimes I have an idea or a feeling and it's just sort of this abstract, sort of gooey thing. And it's kind of a constant question of like, what is the best channel to get it out, to kind of get across whatever this thought or concept is. And I think that's why initially I was so drawn to making videos, because that was probably the thing I started with earliest. Writing, yeah, but I think, earliest in childhood, I wanted to be a director or something. I think the reason partially I was so drawn to it is because it's a combination of all three of those mediums: the writing, the visual, and the sound aspect. Like with making a music video, you can get a song and a video kind of together, or with a video poem, you can kind of have them both working. And sometimes it takes a few different mediums to express the same idea. In 2021, I released an album of music called Yellow Bark Spider, which was my attempt to sort of make a soundtrack for myself for the book, to just try to explore the ideas of the book while abandoning words completely, just to try to explore the book through the medium of sound in a different way. And it really helped. And I think there are some things that can be said with pure sound that can never be said with language. I think that's music's greatest power, is that it can express things that are inexpressible and can't really be done in any other way. So yeah, it's always a tough choice knowing the right medium. I don't know that I have a good answer for you, but each medium has its strengths. And Also, sometimes I'm just not skilled enough in a medium to get the idea out. So I'm like, okay, I can't make this as a video. That's too hard. So I'll write it. Or, so sometimes there's more practical limitations.
Yeah, I get it. Is that album like available somewhere so that people can actually hear it while they're listening to the book, so they get like a full experience?
You could, yeah. It might be a little distracting to do both at once. I've never tried that, but I suppose you could. I released it in the public domain, so it can be used freely. You can take the songs and remix them. You can use them in a video project. Just credit me or whatever. But yeah, it's on Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music, kind of every streaming platform, and you can download it for free if you want it.
That's amazing. So you're saying like you did the sound part, you did the writing part, and now the next thing for Yellow Bark Spider is to become a movie.
Oh no.
Oh my god.
Maybe, yeah. That would be interesting. I don't know that I would want to direct it, but if someone else did, I would be interested to see where they took it. But um, yeah, that would be interesting.
Did you ever think like if it became at one moment a movie, because I believe that truly it has a potential for it, like as a story arc, it's very like interesting made, and it's already written with some like transitioning scenes in between different moments of the life of the character and all of that. So if you could make it a movie and you could pick anybody to play the characters, like does somebody pop to your mind like immediately?
I think that if it was made into a movie, I would want it to be almost rewritten completely for that medium. But I think for the actors, I think it would be best if they were all actors who were not known at all, so that they just seem like real people. You're not seeing an actor, or like, it's so silly to imagine like Josh Brolin or something playing Marlin, like sort of a No Country for Old Men thing. It would just be very odd. So as much as that would be kind of a fun exercise, none come to mind immediately. But I do know that when I see films where I don't know any of the actors, there may be even non-actors that are just like, Robert Bresson talks about using models, and not, he doesn't call them actors, and they're all just sort of taken from the street for, special sort of appearance that they have or something. I think that would be a good way to do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because sometimes when we have those AAA actors and stuff like that, they're not actually acting. They're just appearing as cameos of themselves as their most popular characters, and sometimes they can just hijack the character and it becomes about the actor and not about the story, which is what's actually important. So I love that you're thinking about that different approach.
A lot of pleasure to watching a big name actor, and you're aware you're watching Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling in a scene together, and that's fun, and you buy into this strange kind of suspended disbelief. But I think the ones that have really gripped me, I think, were non-actors or people who I didn't know, so that you can just, you're in it with them rather than sort of watching them from a distance, which I think is important to the kind of themes of the book. I wanted the reader and the character to be as close as I could get them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. In your writing, in your art in general, you talk about stuff of occult, of folklore related themes and stuff like that. So, what is your relationship with these topics, and where do you consult for inspiration? Like, do you have some specific books or people or just oral histories? What is your like treasure from which you take your inspiration?
I don't have tons of great sources. I wish I did, so I'll just cover that quickly. There's a few YouTube channels of universities that will just post lectures, and that's something I listen to a lot of. There's a historian called, I think his name's Ronald Hutton, and he talks a lot about like Welsh folklore and Scottish and kind of the British Isles kind of folklore, and that's something I listen to a lot. Gosh, yeah, we've just got books. I can't think of any at the top of my mind. Internet articles, I'm just kind of always on the lookout for it, so it's hard to call out specific ones. But in terms of what drew me to folklore specifically, I think is just kind of a lifelong passion for the unseen and the fantastic and the kind of the sublime, I guess. I was always, as a kid, a little disappointed with reality, I think. I had a very overactive imagination. I think a lot of artists do, maybe. And I sort of a big disappointment in childhood was realizing I would never see, a fairy or something. That was something I always wanted running around in the woods, You want that kind of magic to be real. But folklore can kind of get you there in a way, and it's very much about that. To me, like this wonderful reflection of the earliest and purest forms of storytelling, which is this amazing human invention that we all enjoy every day. And I just picture sort of early humans huddling around a fire telling each other stories to kind of fight off the blackness. And that's still completely captures the role of artists to this day in my mind. I think it's easy to fall into a trap where we imagine that art is some kind of luxury, some kind of, we cover our basics and then we can have art if maybe we'll get to it kind of thing. Like it's purely aesthetic or impractical objects. Like you can't pound a nail with a painting kind of thing. We all found during the COVID lockdown how much of a lie that was, because we all turned to art not just to distract us and entertain us, but to nourish us in a period of profound isolation. And I think we all turn to stories and movies and old TV shows we used to love or whatever it might be. And to me, this is maybe a bit meandering, but to me, that's folklore. To me, that's people comforting each other with stories of why we can't go out into the woods or something like that to keep us safe and to keep us entertained for those long winter nights when it's dark and the crops are dead in the fields and we need to survive. So that's my feelings on folklore, I guess. But in terms of the occult, I think it's just a very powerful and compelling rabbit hole to fall down. As someone who, like I said, always wanted to believe in magic as a kid, I think it's maybe something in me is prone to being drawn to a kind of magical underworld. And so it's kind of always held that attraction to me. And the symbols are so rich. It's such a symbolic tradition. And I love symbols, and I love really obscure symbols and trying to feed them into my work in different ways where something can resonate over here, and you don't really know why it's feeling connected, but there's something to that. And I try to work that in as much as possible, just as a kind of subcurrent to everything I do.
That's beautiful. And yeah, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, when you talked about the symbols, there are many, many symbols. I mean, the name of the book itself, Vampire Spider, but also the calico that appears and some other characters that are there to like do, I don't know how to say it in English, like to drive the point home, like to show you what's actually happening. And yeah, I agree, like from an anthropological perspective, stories are what united us as humans, what comforted us through long winter nights, through scary storms, through a famine, through whatever tragedies struck humans. We didn't understand them, we didn't have the science that we have now, we didn't have thousands of years of philosophy and stuff like that try to answer those stuff from like an objective scientific type of way, but people still needed that comfort of answers, and then they created stories. And even today people share, they create the stories, like parents will say to their children that when it's a storm, like those are the giants fighting or something, like they'll keep that magic alive. And even Tooth Fairy and Santa, what are they? I mean, yeah, capitalist symbols, but still, there are also like ways to guide children through specific transitions in life that they have. So storytelling is a powerful tool for all of us. And it does not matter if we are artists by trade, if we just needed some creative outlet, or if we needed to escape the reality in the pandemic. I mean, I also started drawing in pandemic because I needed something to get out of my head. Because if I tried to read books, I mean, I was reading books at that moment, but the thoughts would like fly away and they would get into some anxious waters and it would suck. But then, I started doing some coloring books and some painting and stuff like that, just to totally isolate from that mind that is anxious and do something with the hands and see something created from nothing, and that gives a specific type of comfort that can be explained. And everybody should have like a right and a privilege and an opportunity to find some type of artistic expression and let their voice be heard through that, and get rid of all of the anxiety or stress or whatever.
Maybe even a coloring book can be storytelling in a way, because you open it and it's blank and there's some shapes filled out. You can see where it might go. And as you fill it in, there's the kind of building anticipation. You can see the resolution coming. And then when you complete it, there's this sort of feeling of a circle coming to a close, which I think a lot of stories, not all, but a lot of stories kind of have that to make them feel like we've completed and something, we've learned, we've grown, we've traveled and returned home and seen home again from new eyes,
Like the hero's journey wheel.
Exactly.
Let's now focus a little bit more on the book itself, because that is the whole idea. This will be coming out at the moment when the book gets published, so that people can get excited about it and order their copy. You mentioned some parts of how it came to be, but what was that moment when you decided, yes, I'm gonna write this book, and what was that moment when you realized, oh my god, this is gonna be published, like this is the story that will be put on people's shelves, it will be part of their home, it will be part of their minds for who knows how long.
I'm grappling with, that's very odd. I feel I have a responsibility to make sure that it's good so people will enjoy it, and that it can take up space in their homes. So I think objects in our homes have a kind of energy to them, and ebooks are great for a lot of reasons, but I think a physical book, it has this kind of something palpable about it. But anyway, that's a diversion maybe. I think anytime I'm talking about starting to work on my book initially, I hesitate to use the word intent at any point, because I didn't really intend to write it. I had no predetermined goals or plans. I didn't even know if it would be a book at all. There were kind of forks in the road where it could have the book could have gone in this direction or that, and I just tried to kind of listen to where the book wanted to go, and it kind of had a mind of its own in some way, and I just tried to follow it as faithfully as I could and kind of record its movements. But I think sometimes it required me to step away for a month or two and then come back with fresh eyes and try to figure out what it was, because the book as it is now, the finished one, is still pretty fragmentary. It sort of moves between these kind of vignettes, but at the beginning it was 100 times more fragmentary. It was just a train wreck of different images and a paragraph here and there. I have a document still that is like 10,000 words long that is just cut chapters that I took out of the final one, because for whatever instinctive reason, it just was pulling the book in the wrong direction, or it distracted in a moment where it needed to land. It's hard to use language to kind of describe it, but it was just a very organic process writing it. But in terms of how it, like the very beginning of how it started, I was working in a pretty mind-numbing office job, and I think jobs like that make people want to write. Maybe I think that's I think a lot of people, your mind races, and you want to work on writing, I should say. You don't want to work. So yeah, I had this folded up sheet of paper that I kept under the keyboard, and I would just slide it out like one line at a time and write a bit, and then slide it back if someone was coming by. And some of those bits I wrote then are still in the book. It was a completely fragmentary process. But after a few years of this kind of approach, I think I just felt that in time some important, or themes that were important to me at least, started to emerge. And I felt like I was growing up as I wrote the book, because I started it when I was 24, and I really didn't know anything about writing a book. I didn't know anything about who I was. I basically was just trying to rip off William Burroughs or something like that. I don't really know. It wasn't very original. I was just trying to come up with something. But as I continued to write it, I came out as trans and started digging through a lot of my childhood and digging into old memories and old injuries and things that had happened, and just trying to make sense of them. And then the book started to reflect that too. And it was scary to write, but I think it was because I wasn't writing it with the benefit of looking at things retrospectively. It wasn't like I was 40 writing about being 20. I was kind of going through it parallel to the character. In doing that, the book kind of slowly, I realized, told me it needed to be kind of a coming of age story, which was not what I set out to write. Once I realized what it wanted to be, I just kind of listened and tried to make that as faithful as possible. And I had a wonderful editor named Conyer Clayton, who was really great, and she just asked me some really great questions about what the book was and what this meant or that meant, and it helped me kind of get out of my own head and see it with new eyes. That was kind of the final piece of figuring out all of these need to fit together, even if it's kind of abstractly, they need to kind of lock into some kind of inner coherence so that people, I didn't want people to feel lost reading it. I didn't want people to feel confused. I wanted people to be in it with the main character, Kid, and going through it with her so that they could go on this journey. And I'm kind of happy to know that you read it in kind of a single breath, because the great thing about the length is you can do that. You can kind of just sit down, and that was kind of my hope of how people would read it, is just kind of you take it in all at once and then you put it down and say, well, I'm never reading that again.
No, I read it a few times because I was preparing for this, so don't worry. But that initial read was practically in one breath, because it was like organically building up, and there were some, as I mentioned before, like transitions or interruptions, like little shorter stories, vignettes that were popping up, but I did not see them as something that would remove me from it. I just saw it like when you're dreaming and then you go like deeper and deeper, so the stuff gets warped a little bit, but then it takes you further and then you see something else. And I mean, the thing that you did with two little smut pieces and then putting the questionnaire in the middle of it for hormonal therapy assessment was genius. I just love how it was made from that like editing perspective. It was very, very effective. Like, yes, here it is. Like, nothing else has to be said.
That's copy and pasted. That's a real hormone readiness assessment that I received from a therapist. I just took it and put it in the book.
Yeah, that's great, because I honestly, I knew some of the questions that appear on it, but as I never went through the process myself, I didn't know what happens actually. So I was like studying the questions to see like, wow, from like perspective of somebody who does interviews and research and stuff like that, and studied about therapy in some cases, like what is even the language that's used and how encouraging it is, and the whole part about informed consent and what's actually going to happen with your body and with the people around you and all of that. It is great that you included it in it, because I believe that it will help people who are like close-minded, but they believe they're not close-minded, to actually to actually see what's it about, like, and then see that it's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that doctors will just throw tea at you and let it be, or give you any type of like medical procedures. It is a process. It's a medical thing. It's not something that goes on a whim that you can just like decide one day and that's it. As many other medical procedures are, as many other therapy processes are, it's made with you in mind. It's made so that you can be your true self in the best way possible without feeling any type of anxiousness or regret or anything else, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's different, like you did it in Canada, right?
Yeah, BC.
British Columbia for your non-Canadian watchers. Yeah. So it may be different in other provinces. I can't speak to that, but yeah, pretty thorough and very thoughtfully written in BC at least.
We need more information like that. Everybody deserves to know that stuff, and especially people who wish to go through the process so they don't have to do it blindly. Like there is no reason to do it like that.
Fiction is you can fit it in there. It's like a Trojan horse. You can kind of bring in a little concept and just drop it in front of someone, and bring it in a way where they're discovering it for themselves. They're not being told something. And I think that's one of the many powers of fiction.
Yeah, sometimes you have to be sneaky like that.
Yeah, not to trick anybody.
Let people lower their defenses so they can be open to an idea, which is maybe kind of just a nice way of saying a trick, but I don't mean it that way.
It's an opportunity to learn and grow, if they want to.
Yes.
Can we see kid as like an extension of yourself? Is it autobiographic in the full extent, or is kid any kid that wants to see themselves in it? Like, how did you write the character?
That's something I thought about a lot because I recognized as I was continuing to write the book and I was realizing that it was really about kids' perspective, because there was a point in the book where she was just one character. But once I started to realize it was about her, I kind of realized, uh-oh, we've got some things in common and some surface details that might make people think it's like an author self-insert, and it's just kind of a thinly veiled autobiography. It's not. She's a fictional character. We certainly have things in common. And like I said, we sort of grew in similar ways, maybe. And maybe most authors' first books are kind of have necessarily they're writing through some things in themselves so they can get it out of the way, you know. I think in terms of our differences, and I mean there was a point in the book where it was written in the first person too, because I wanted Kid to not have a name, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of have a not named protagonist, but I realized it made it too personal for me and it made it too hard to write some scenes. When Kid was going through things, it was just too heavy. I would be like freaking out after I wrote a chapter. I'd be like, I can't edit this. Like, this is too much. When I switched into the third person, I realized she needed a name, and I thought keeping her name Kid made it feel kind of anonymous in a sense. And, you know, her mom's name is Mom, and her dad's name is, or her stepdad's name is Stepdad, and, you know, best friend or roommate, just to kind of, it's almost like some details were scrubbed out so that you could have some blank canvas to insert your own name or to fit your own experiences into the gaps. That was the hope anyway. I don't know if it succeeded, but that was the idea behind it.
Yeah, it did. For my humble opinion, it did. Because it made me think about representation in terms of how sometimes being ambiguous can actually provide more space for people to fill in the blanks and insert themselves into the story than trying to like very strictly define a character that will then alienate a lot of people, because they will just see something like, oh no, this does not relate to me, I cannot even continue, like it broke the magic, which I believe it did not happen with this book. And I love that the characters had those names, and it actually reminded me, I have no idea if you watch the show or not, but Once Upon a Time, it's like a revisiting of all like fairy tales that we have, but through different perspectives, to show that not all good guys are good guys and not all villains are villains, and there is a lot of gray area in between. Like one of the main characters is the evil queen, and she adopts a child that turns out to be, it's too complicated, it's like a telenovela but in like fairy tale land. But one of the characters calls her child Kid because she had to let him go when he was born. So when he found her afterwards, she had like issues relating to him, but she still wanted to let him know she's there for him. So Kid was used as a pet name for him, to like, because she can call him son because he's somebody else's son, but he's also her son, so he just became a Kid. So it's something that popped up to my mind, but obviously if you didn't watch it has nothing to do with it. So it's just my insert.
A similar idea, I think, of, yeah, kind of subtractive storytelling, maybe, is a way of looking at that. I don't know. Yeah, similar idea. I haven't seen the show, but I'm sure other people have done it. And I think there's a book called Milkman by Anna Burns. It's a Belfast writer, and I don't know if all the characters don't have names, but several of them do. They're just like, the milkman is referred to as Milkman, and there's a woman who's addicted to pills and she's known as Pills Girl, and you know, this kind of thing. Certainly didn't come up with it whole cloth, but it seemed like a useful tool to get across what I was trying to say.
One of the characters that you did name, or I guess it's not name, I have no idea, maybe I don't understand the cultural reference, but the character of
Yeah, just Marlon.
Marlin, okay. Who is that character and what does he represent, and how do we influence how we perceive that character in terms of, because I believe that it reflects some stuff in real life in terms of gender, the socialization of kids and learning about toxic masculinity and stuff like that. So I just want to know what was the motivation behind including that character and what does he mean?
Right, hitting the nail on the head there. Marlin is a figment of Kid's mind. He's kind of like an embodied coping mechanism, sort of like an imaginary avatar that Kid projects herself into. And to me, yeah, he represents this kind of shield of toxic masculinity, of, kind of building this wall that is tough and cold and uncaring and violent so that she can feel safe behind this other person who can kind of stand between her and the world in a way. People who are socialized male learn this kind of behavior, if not at home or on TV or something, then from peers at school. This kind of notion that to survive you have to be tough or mean or violent or uncaring or cold or something like this. We can learn that from family sometimes, and in the case of my book, Kid learns this from her grandpa and from her cousins too, who are quite nasty. Kid kind of adopts this alter ego, which he calls Marlin, to try to empower himself to fight off these kind of feelings of fear and powerlessness that come from being traumatized and needing to protect herself. In terms of how to address toxic masculinity, I think the thing with it is the sort of protection that it offers can work to some extent. Like if you need to feel protected, that kind of front can work in the short term to provide some relief from that kind of terror that is beneath it. But there is a cost, which is that it stunts men, hurts people around them. As long as you're not facing these problems that you're hiding from, then you're doomed to repeat them. And it creates these kind of cycles of toxic behavior that can pass between generations and often does. And I think the way to fight it is to dig into what's beneath it, because it is an often uncaring and brutal world that we live in. And so I think we can all understand that it could come in handy now and then to kind of be harsh or angry or defensive. But we need to look at an individual level at what unmet need is beneath that kind of veneer, Is it a fear of inadequacy, or a fear of being taken advantage of, or a fear of being hurt or criticized, or these kind of things? Because if we look at it as coming from a place of fear, then you can dig down into that and address the root rather than just the surface behavior. But I think as long as those unmet needs aren't being addressed, then the cycles will keep being perpetuated. Cycles can be broken, patterns can be broken. There's that big chunk in the book about breaking a pattern, and it's very much what it's about. It just takes a lot of courage and a lot of tough inner work that you can't be cold and uncaring. You have to feel into it to heal it.
I totally agree, and I mean that part in the book, the way that it was formatted to lead you through that process of a thought transforming itself into something totally else, it was beautiful. Like those 4 pages where it starts as something and it ends as something else, but it's one coherent, it's a whole, it's not fragmented, because some processes happen, it happens one moment here, one moment there and all of that, but sometimes we just have to say, no, I'm gonna deal with this and grind through it until we get to that breakthrough that will allow us to grow past that, whatever was bothering us. Some other topics that you included in the book deal with panic attacks, social anxiety, peer pressure, bullying, sexual assault, self-harm and all of that, which are some hard topics, and it's great that we're breaking silence on them. But what would you advise to people who might be struggling with some of those feelings, some of those experiences, and who might be watching this right now? What would you say to them to provide them a bit of hope, to provide them a bit of advice, support, or whatever you believe they might have use of?
First of all, it's cliche, but it needs to be said that you're not alone. So much of my life as an adolescent was spent thinking that I was some kind of alien. This applies to adults too, but from my experience, that I was some kind of alien and that no one could possibly relate to my inner experience, that it was too specific, too weird, too internal, and kind of incomprehensible. But what that leads to is a very self-isolating experience. And I tried to explore that in the book through Kid, the kind of impacts of that isolation can do when you cut yourself off from people. And these ordeals that you mentioned are really heavy to handle even as an adult. So you can't go through those things alone. It'll eat you alive and it could kill you. You have to fight with everything you've got to come up for air somehow in any way you can. And I think you have to share your struggles in some way, because I think they need to be expressed, which is a great power of art as well. It can't fester, it'll turn into shame. And that is a sickness that can be lethal, I think. So I think if there's no one in your life that you can trust, you might need to take a leap of faith. Try to see a therapist or a counselor, or there's online tools to connect you with people you can talk to. I think that's really important as an access. Some people have limited access to these things. And if you're someone like Kid who maybe has a tendency to kind of turn inward and go silent and kind of shut down and shrink yourself and hide, those problems don't go away. They do linger, and they start showing up in different ways that maybe are unexpected, or you don't realize it's linked to this thing that you're kind of holding on to. So they need to be confronted, but in a safe way and at your own pace. It has to be at your own pace. It can't be at someone else's pace. It can't be rushed. And that kind of undertaking, I think it is literally impossible to do it alone. It's too difficult for any person to do it alone. I think it's just important to remember that we're all human and we all suffer, and I can guarantee that someone alive on this planet is going through something that you're going through in some way. No one is an island in that sense. So I think, yeah, shame breeds in the dark, but it dies in the light. And it's really terrifying work to confront that, but it's the most important work you can do in your life, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like sometimes you have to stop sweeping things under the rug because you're gonna get tripped over it because it just piles up too much. So we have to do it, and having people around us who understand it, who might not even have to understand it completely, because all of us are unique, and the chances of finding somebody who has literally identical life path and identical problems and life values and goals and everything else is zero, because we're all unique. But we can find people who understand at least some parts of us that we wish that can be understood, and then allow them to actually hear us and understand us and support us. And sometimes that's our step that we have to make, like to even open up to the possibility of being vulnerable in front of other people and letting them know, yes, here is what I'm struggling with. Could you please like offer a ear or something like to help out?
Yeah, for some people it's easier to do that with someone you know, and for some people like me, I think it's maybe easier with a stranger for that first step. Just reach out, try, it's worth it.
And who are the people in your life who have proven to be your biggest supporters, who have led you through some difficult moments in your life, who have stood by you when you were transitioning, who were the first people to read your book before it even got out to the editors?
My answer to that is my partner, Neve. She is a really wonderful person who has helped me out a lot. We've been together quite a few years, and she helped me through my transition and all kinds of things, writing this book, all of the kind of processing of childhood and things that were required to write the book. And she's been there for all of it. So definitely, yes, my partner has been wonderful for that. And also my parents are very sweet. I'm one of those lucky people that has two great parents. I know a lot of people can't say that, so I'm always grateful for them. So yeah, they've been kind of supporters, both of myself personally, but my work too, ever since before I was born. So yeah, and in terms of who I showed the book to, very few people. I kind of just worked on it by myself as a very internal process. It wasn't until I started submitting it places and getting feedback that I was kind of like, oh, the book isn't a complete mess. It actually makes sense. So that was useful to know that, but yeah, So yeah, the fact that the book makes sense, I'll give some credit to my editor as well, Conyer Clayton, because they did great work on it as well.
That's amazing. And yeah, I agree. Like when you're writing stuff, sometimes you get to that point where like I can't anymore. Like I can't. If I read another sentence of this, I will vomit in my own mouth. Like I can't. And then you have to give it to somebody else, and they'll read it. Like yeah, they'll find some like syntax issues or whatever, like grammar, but they will see it objectively because they did not spend hours or months on that piece. So they see it with fresh eyes. They don't see every mistake that went into making it, so they can actually evaluate it sometimes even more accurately than ourselves, especially dealing with imposter syndrome and stuff like that can get into the way of like realizing your own not just potential but the strengths and talents that you already have.
Yeah, and that can be really encouraging, and sometimes even critical feedback can be helpful too, because they might see an issue that you didn't see. Any feedback just to kind of get you out of your head and into seeing it with fresh eyes is to me necessary. I don't know. Maybe some people can create completely in isolation, but that's not me. I like to start it on my own and then show it to people and be like, tell me what's not working. Okay, great. And keep working on it.
Yeah, that's great. There's not absolutely nothing like wrong with that method. We need other people. Like I mean, especially if you're showing the work to other people as well. If you're making something for yourself, then keep it for yourself if you wish to do so, and that's fine. But sometimes, if you want to share it with other people, it's best to before that give it to some other people that you trust. They can help you, like guide you through the rest of the way. If we're using like the storytelling moments and all of that, it's like when the hero is coming into the dark woods and they're not sure what way to go, and then some old granny or somebody comes with a lantern and shows them the way. Like sometimes you need that.
Definitely. Or we need a Toto, a little dog, along with us to cheer us on.
Exactly, yeah. We have this segment, Feminist Recommends. So if you have any books, music, films, or whatever that you wish to recommend to people watching this that brings you joy, that help you through difficult times, that help you write better, or just have some great pastime, now is the moment to recommend it.
I love that. My partner and I read some books together, and we're currently reading a book called The Radium Girls, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that kind of chapter of history in the United States. But yeah, that book reading that has been a really kind of eye-opening experience. It's written by Kate Moore, I think is her name. And it's the story of the women who worked in factories in the 1920s painting glow-in-the-dark paint on watches. And they didn't know at the time that the radium they were using in the paint was extremely radioactive. And at the time, radium was kind of thought to be like this wonder chemical that would, like, they put it in toothpaste, they put it in health tonics, health drinks. Doctors would recommend these radium infused drinks because it was found by Mary Curie and her husband, whose name I forget, to be able to cure some cancers and things like this. So, or to treat them rather. So it was thought to be this healthy, wonderful thing. And so these women would work in these factories in the 1920s, and they would do a technique called lip pointing because they had these tiny brushes. So they would dip the brush in their mouth with the paint on it and then continue painting. Of course, they started to have horrible illnesses and diseases, and their jaws would rot and fall off and things like this. And the companies, I think it was called the US Radium Corporation, was aware that this was not safe, but they would lie to the women and say, it can't be this, it can't be that. And these women had to really fight really hard to fight against like labor laws and these big corporations and all these things. And also even just struggling to get doctors to believe that they were ill. And it's not just like, oh, a toothache or something. It's like, no, my jaw is loose. The bones are starting to come to pieces. So it was just like we're not even halfway through it, but it's a really great read. And just about that particular chapter of kind of working class women in America and the kind of labor struggles of that time. But in terms of maybe lighter things, lighter topics, for kind of cozy or joyful reads, I really recommend that folks take a look through their local bookstores, children's and YA sections, particularly graphic novels. My partner and I started doing this a few years ago, and I've just been consistently blown away by the amazing variety of representation that's in YA books now. Certainly wasn't like that when I was at the age, growing up reading those. But also the quality of the books and the illustrations and things is just wonderful. So I'll shout out a few. There's a series called Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. Really lovely. It's just like a warm kind of queer hug. It's just really sweet. And Tilly Walden's books, particularly On a Sunbeam and Sheets by Brenna Thumler. I think that's her name. Yeah, there's just like a wealth of really smart, queer, talented people who are making these amazing books that are, yeah, a source of joy, but also, they can be dealing with kind of tough topics too, because kids go through hard shit. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Thank you so much for those recommendations. I mean, I will take them into consideration myself, and I hope people will too. And I agree, young adult books are one of the best places to seek comfort and some guidance on how to deal with some stuff in your life, because they are targeted to people who are changing from being just a kid who has zero agency over their life and who is just exploring who they are, what they want, who they want to be one day, and then turning into a person who has to pay bills and has a partner and has some totally new problems than I did in the school playground and stuff like that. And yeah, sometimes it's just like some vampire werewolf smut and stuff like that, not gonna lie. But sometimes there is some other stuff in it as well, or even in that specific section that can allow people to learn about new topics or to find new ways to deal with certain situations or just to escape. Sometimes you just need to let go and not even think about it. And the book on uranium girls, I will definitely check it out, because I moved to Canada a year ago and I didn't have much contact with uranium in any sense. Luckily, I did not yet. But since I came here, I've been recommended on social media and stuff people from Canada who go scouting to thrift stores and stuff like that for uranium glass.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, what? And okay, yeah, and then you put it on your shelf in your kitchen and it glows in the dark. Look how cute it is. With such a beautiful emerald color and all that. I'm like, yeah, but you're gonna die. Is the price you want to pay for that aesthetic your life? What? The women's health issues in factories has been overlooked literally forever, and it still is. We had one episode on textile industries and stuff like that, which is one of the worst when it comes to that. And even my own grandma, she used to work in a factory that dealt with textiles and colors for textiles. So she was, breathing all of those fumes, and everything was lead based in the 70s. So because it was Yugoslavia, they were like, yeah, we have to actually help our people, healthcare and all of that, but we have to see how we can help them on day-to-day basis. So it was mandatory for people to get with their free lunch at work, they would get 2 deciliters of milk or half a liter of milk, and they would have to drink that milk, because then it would I don't know the science behind it, but apparently milk catches lead and then it can easily leave the system. So they were doing that to help the women survive, to not have long-term effects of lead poisoning. But times were tough and women were just trying to support their families and stuff like that. So what my grandma and other women around her would do, they would fake they were drinking their milk and they would take it home, and they would give it to their children, or they would make cheese out of that milk to feed the family, but they themselves denied themselves the healing trick that they could use to help themselves. So some of them have a lot of issues now medically because of all of that, even though it happened so many years ago. So we need to reassess how we help people who work in such difficult conditions, and help them actually long term, and themselves and their families, to provide them the best opportunity not only to survive but to thrive as well.
Kind of reading these history books is, like you're pointing out, it's not really history. It is, but history repeats. So we can look at these things that maybe seems like an extreme example of radium paint going in your mouth, but that sort of figuratively is still happening in different ways. And so yeah, that's something that history writing can help us contextualize and understand. And the book is kind of written almost novelistically, so it's kind of, there's quotes and things like that worked in, but it really puts you in the women's shoes, which is really important because then you can really feel it and dig into it. And I think in a way that like a news article about something horrible that happened can't, because it's a form of storytelling, but it's not one where we can penetrate it somehow. Like it kind of just strikes us rather than immersing us in some way where we can understand it on a human level. Maybe I may be going off topic there, but that's some thoughts.
No, I totally agree, because sometimes we have that big picture, we have the news and all of that, but behind that is the narrative of the people who actually live through that. And we very rarely give the people opportunity to actually share their story. We don't deem it important, we don't spend resources on it and stuff like that. We don't provide the media space or just even socialization of people to realize, wait, you should be listening to other people's stories, not just your own. This actually brings us to the end of the episode. So my last question for you is, if you have any type of message for the audience or call for action, or just want to shout out the book a little bit more, stuff like that, now is the space to do so.
The shout out of the way first. The book comes out, it's called Yellow Bark Spider, and it comes out with Radiant Press on October 22nd, 2024. So you should be able to find it online, or preferably in your local bookstore. Or if you're going to order it online, order it from the publisher, because Amazon sucks. So don't go through that. That aside, I guess I just wanted to thank everyone for making it this far into the interview and listening to me babble on. I appreciate it. I think on a more serious note, I think thoughtful conversation is always going to be the best way forward in a divided world. And I think there's no better way to kind of bridge a divide than through mutual respect and compassionate communication wherever possible. Obviously, not in all cases is that possible, but where we can. So platforms like yours, It's Just Feminism, I think is really incredibly important. And so I want to thank you for being a wonderful host, and thank you for having me and taking interest in my work. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
No, thank you so much. Like I loved it when Holly from River's Street Writing, when she asked me, would you like to meet Harman and talk about her book? I was like, yes! I just told her, just send me the book beforehand, I can read it and prepare like that. And when I read the book, I was like, yes, this is amazing, this needs to be shared. And I really hope that this book will end up not only in bookstores, but in libraries, especially in like libraries related to like community centers where young adults can more easily find them. The holiday season is approaching a lot of that, so if people wish to give their book-loving family members and friends something that will make them like either step out of their shoes into somebody else's, or finally be able to look into the mirror if they relate in some way. Like it's an amazing opportunity for exploration of a lot of topics, and it's very playful and it's a bit dark, but also like very dreamlike. It's hard to explain, and I just hope that many people will get that opportunity to list through it and find their own little sentences to write in their journals that will always stay for them, as some sentences stayed with me.
Hope so too.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today, for sharing the behind the scenes of writing this book. One of the things that went through my mind was like, this is amazing, because in like 20 years some kid they will be assigned their book for their literature, like in school for English, and then they'll have to write what are these characters, what did the author mean by using this character and all of that, and they will have this material to reference.
Your kids, hello.
Yeah, I mean that is my hope, really, that we will stop banning books that are very important, that speak of representation, that speak of super important topics that are related to a lot of people, and move into providing space to giving opportunities when it comes to publishing, because we have a lot of issues in that discrimination. Then when it comes to reading habits as well, promotions and stuff like that. So I really hope that you and other authors like you will get that recognition that you truly deserve. And that will be all for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching this, for sticking around. Thank you, Harman, once again for finding time to be here today with me to talk about your new book. I hope that this conversation inspired some people to actually seek the book and some other materials that you mentioned as well. One of the materials shared in the book was, as I mentioned, the hormonal treatment assessment questionnaire. So if this is something that you need for yourself, that you wish to get more information on and more support, I will put some resources down below for you as well. And of course, as always, please be as kind, as tolerant, as wonderful as you can be in the comments down below, where you are welcome to share your own thoughts, experiences, opinions, book reviews, and stuff like that.
Have a nice day.
Bye.